Okay, so this is Zach McMahon, doing my first affirmative response. So first, I'm going to talk about my opponent's disadvantages. Then I'm going to move on to my harms, which were not considered or refuted by my opponent. After that, I'm going to talk about why my plan will be the best option for the problems that we're currently experiencing. Um, So, for my opponent's first disadvantage, my opponent stated that the police departments need these military vehicles for natural disasters, the ones that come without any warning signs, so people could be rescued in a timely manner. My first topic would be conceding to the point that my opponent made that militarized vehicles are important in a natural disaster situation. There's no way of getting around that. In response to this, I would like to say that the National Guard has access to all of these same vehicles, which would be restricted from police. So the National Guard has bases near and around almost every big city in the United States. So this would mean that, the National Guard could do the same job that the police do. So what's the difference between the police saving these people and the National Guard saving these people? So the police, logically, I would think that the National Guard would be just as adequate at delivering medical supplies as it would as local or state police. Typically, when there's a horrible natural disaster, the first person that the governor is going to call is the National Guard every single time. That being said, National Guard are also better trained to deal with situations like this. Police officers, basically their goals or what they're trained to do is to protect citizens, fight crime, and they're also trained on making the city safer. And I'm not trying to belittle that whatsoever. But on the other hand, the National Guard, they're trained to respond to national disasters. They're trained to respond to outside forces that we can't really control. So that is a better option when dealing with people that would be stranded than going the police route. So that would be my opponent's first disadvantage. And for her second disadvantage, my opponent stated that it would be bad if police became more approachable because police are not meant to be our friends. It would put them in more harm's way because apparently there is a lot of hatred towards the police that people have probably had during past experiences. But what I have to say to that is that friendly and approachable policing is the best way for a community to have positive encounters with the police, thereby changing the perception that police are bad, because they're not. When you have police officers driving around in huge vehicles and military garb with automatic weapons slung on their backs, um, people don't tolerate the officers as well. They're not going to respond to them in the way that the officer wants them to respond, and so that's going to lead to an increased use of force, which typically is not necessary. It alienates these police officers from the rest of the population and makes them think that they're dangerous or threatening, which they're not. Um, if you put a friendly face on that officer, likewise, and he walks around the streets waving and saying good morning to everybody that he sees on the streets, people are going to remember his face. And they're going to know that, police aren't all bad. And that will make a change quickly and decisively if our policies change towards more personable community policing. And that's what they're trying to do right now. So from my opponent's last disadvantage, she stated these assault vehicles are absolutely necessary for riots. And I personally would argue that armored vehicles are total overkill in this situation, or any riot situation. Police departments have riot vans which can do all the same things that a normal assault vehicle can do, except they're just not heavily armored. They can provide transport for 10 to 20 SWAT officers or riot officers, and they take up a large amount of space in streets, which is one of the most important things that these armored vehicles do. Is they occupy space and they look intimidating. You don't need it to be intimidating, you just need it to look intimidating. And by occupying the space that these riot vans can, they occupy a certain amount of space and they can use that for riot and crowd control, just like you'd be able to use an armored vehicle. Um, the only difference about these vans is that they're not considered surplus because they're not armored vehicles. And you got to also think 99.9% of these protesters, they're not going to bring a gun to a riot. That is one of the stupidest things you could possibly do because all the police are armed with less than lethal and also lethal weapons. So there's a good chance if you bring a gun to a riot, you're going to get shot. So there's no need for police to have armored vehicles because really, in a riot situation, there's not that many guns. Um, and that's just being honest here. Um, the difference with these vans is they don't eat up the street and they don't tack up a huge maintenance bill, which is a big deal because getting these vehicles, obviously it's great to have them and then they can sit around, but at the same time, there's still a maintenance bill. You can't just let them sit. You have to maintain them. Um, so that was for the third disadvantage. And in regards to my harms, they were never refuted. So I'm just going to state what I said earlier, which is that innocent civilians are killed and injured every year because of these weapons. And just this year, 7 civilians were killed and 46 civilians were harmed or injured by these surplus government weapons, and that's off CNN.com. Um, if you do not vote for my plan, 50 odd people will continue to be injured every year, and 7 people at least will continue to be killed every year. Um, so this issue is going to compound and get worse if we don't do anything about it right now. Um, so my plan has to be voted in right now, otherwise these people will die. Um, I believe that these weapons that the department is getting, the military weapons, I believe that's the biggest issue, more than the vehicles, more than the military guard, more than anything else. And I think that's the issue that needs to be at hand right now. Um, there needs to be some type of reform policy, and if there's not, we need to put mine into place. Um, Otherwise, people are going to continue to die. This has been my first affirmative. Thank you very much. Have a good day.